Welcome, everybody. I hope you can see and hear us. Welcome to this interview webinar. My name is Maaike Blom. I am a consultant at HVFC, and I will be hosting this webinar today. And I'm very happy to be here with another Maaike, so it's the two Maaikes today, namely Maaike Blom of Data4Development. And we're going to talk about a very interesting topic today, which is the Ideal NGO. Maaike will first give a presentation about this topic and what would be an ideal NGO in her view. And following the presentation, we will have a talk about this topic, and we kindly ask you to also ask your questions through the chat, which is on the right-hand side of your screen. And everybody is free to participate in this talk. And we will try to answer the questions as they come along. And if it's not possible, then we will wait a bit until it's possible. And we think that the webinar will take between 30 to 45 minutes, also depending on the number of questions that we will get. But before we start, I hope that everybody can see and hear us. So if you can let us know in the chat, that would be great. Then we know that everything is fine and that we can continue. So I see that someone is typing. Yes, we see it really well. Okay. That's good to know. Before we start, also it's important to know that this webinar will be recorded and that it can be viewed on our YouTube channel. So if you want, also you can share it there with your friends and colleagues and give us a like if you like it. So let's start. Maaike, many thanks for being with us here today. Could you maybe please introduce yourself and tell a bit more about Data4Development?
Yes, thank you, Maaike. Always nice to say that. So I've been working in the development aid sector in a wide variety of roles for almost 30 years now. Originally studied international relations, and well, I've seen the work of development NGOs both in Africa, in Latin America, Asia, and also from the European side, the funding side. Since the last 5 years, I'm the co-founder of Data4Development, and for me, all the work I've been doing in my career comes together at Data4Development. In the sense that, yeah, I've always been busy with operations, measurement, optimizing processes and the like. And what we do with our company is all related to that. So Data4Development helps you with your data and information management in order to increase your organization's efficiency and effectiveness. Well, what does that mean in practice? It's supporting organizations in publishing to IATI, for example, the Open Data Standard, International Aid Transparency Initiative, that's what it stands for. Capacity building on their data and data management, and also helping them with setting up their digital solutions, so all kinds of IT applications. That's what we do.
Okay, well, thank you for that short introduction. I think also for the people who do not know HVFC, I will also shortly introduce what we do. So HVFC is a consultancy firm. It was founded 5 years ago by Han Valk. And we provide consultancy to accelerate the performance of people and organizations we believe in and to help them achieve sustainable development goals. So our services include fundraising, recruitment, monitoring, evaluation, and learning, and also training and coaching on all of those topics. And we have offices in 2 countries, in the Netherlands and in the USA. And then we have also a few consultants based in several countries, in Denmark, in London, and in New York. And we work in over 25 countries with different types of NGOs. I think we can start with our topic of today. So, the Ideal NGO. The floor is yours, Maaike.
Yes, well, maybe you can move on one slide.
Yeah.
Of course, this is a bit of a conceptual exercise, because we all know the Ideal NGO does not exist, like the ideal world does not exist. But it's just to sharpen our minds on what we could do better in the field that we work in. So in principle, every nonprofit organization in essence is driven by a vision to change the world to a better place, be it in terms of justice, climate, equality, poverty reduction, or other causes. And to reach their objectives, most nonprofits have a long-term strategy that drives their actions for change, since most of the changes they would like to contribute to are not changes to be made overnight. So it takes a long breath to complete the mission. And it requires long-term, coherent, and persistent interventions. Let us now look at the average process of a nonprofit organization. So in this simplified picture of the average process, you see on for me, the left-hand side, you see funds coming in and people coming in. Both are needed to do the work. And internally, the work is organized in various projects, and the output of this would be the change in relation to the objective of the nonprofit. Well, so far, so good. Please, the next one. Yeah. Of course, the simplified picture of this in and output is in fact more complex, due to the fact that each project in itself has its own stakeholders and a chain of actors to reach the specific project goals. On average, each project has its own donor and its own target groups, or even target subject, and it's organized in a vertical. This, in fact, still is not a proper representation of the process. So now, when does it start to become messy? In real life, one project can have multiple donors and a multitude of target groups and other stakeholders like consultants or researchers, etc. As we can imagine, in this world, in this reality, there are many factors at play that determine the success of an average nonprofit, both internal and external. In real life, most of the work of a nonprofit is dominated by the project dynamic. Please, yeah. Here we see a circle around this project dynamic, because what I've seen is that actually the measurement of the impact, your original strategic goal, sort of gets less focus along the way. Since the organization is so busy with fundraising and project management and reporting to its stakeholders and other important processes that need to be executed. The counter side of that is that instead of being in the driver's seat of your own strategic agenda, the danger is that the agenda, in fact, is mostly determined by the donors funding your projects, and thus the agenda of the donors instead of your own agenda. Well, how to keep focus on the strategic change of your organization. For me, to keep focus on the strategic change that your organization would like to make represents what the ideal NGO should be doing. Well, how to do that? Can we have the, yeah. How to keep the focus on the strategic change. How to make the circle around reaching your impact more strong. Start all your operations from your own core, be it fundraising, project implementation, lobbying. Instead of a focus just on projects, start with a focus on strategy and seek those partners and allies and donors that can help you achieve your strategic goals for your target group. And in order to do so, you need to be clear and explicit on the change you want to obtain and where you as an organization can add value, compared also with a lot of other actors in the environment that you're working in. And if your organization loses its strategic focus and becomes very much driven just by projects and a project dynamic, it will become more of a 1 in 1,000 and less likely to achieve its long-term goals. Being data-driven is an important instrument to help you stay focused on the strategic goals that you are aiming for and to optimize your organizational process to achieve this. So in the picture on the left, you can see a representation, graphic representation of when the projects start to dominate a lot. It becomes the overview of what the organization wants to achieve is a little bit lost. On the right-hand side, it's the other way around, where the organization is in charge and focuses on it achieving its own strategic objectives. And that way you can reach the impact that you were originally set out to achieve. And having a solid data model helps you to obtain that goal.
Okay. Thank you for this short presentation. I'm wondering for everybody if it's clear, and if there are any questions, then you can type them in the chat, and then we will dive into those. But first, already I have a question for you. If you would be, for example, a director of an NGO. What would you do? Where would you start to reach this ideal situation?
Yes, I think if you're a director of an NGO or a director of a consultancy firm, which I am now, in that sense it's the same. So you have to keep an eye on what you want to achieve in the long term, and make sure that all your processes are organized around the longer term in order not to be, we also have a multitude of clients, and every client has different wishes, like every donor has different wishes. But you have to stay focused in order to move in the direction that you originally set out to achieve. So that would always be my, the way I look at any organization, be it profit or non-profit. Are you still on track with your strategy, and are you moving towards that?
Yeah. And then you might say that, well, but that's easier for a smaller organization and for a large NGO with a multitude of programs or areas in which they're working. Would that also be possible for a larger NGO? What do you think?
Yeah, in fact, the larger you become, the more important it is to keep the organization together and have planned and coherent actions and programs. Because what you don't want is that your different departments, for example, start to become real competitors with each other. Like and not constructing towards a positive change in a certain context. So I think if you're big or small, it remains important to stay focused on your strategic agenda and how you want to achieve that. Of course, you can have strategic goals related to certain thematic fields of expertise that your organization has. But you have to be aware of what the strategy is that you also in that thematic field are working on, and not just sit on your own little program or project island, so to say, because then you also lose the sense of organization in terms of 1 and 1 is 3, right? Because then you're just isolated and you do your own thing. You don't know what the others are doing. You can't help each other. And you can't profit either from the scale that your organization has, because you're isolated. You don't feel the sense of belonging to the same agenda, the same goal is less.
Yeah. Well, we have some remarks and one question already in the chat. So one remark is very clear. Love the final slide, very informative. So compliment for you, Maaike. And then also great story, thanks. What to do if the donors do not allow us to spend budget on collecting the KPI data, but only the short-term results of the project?
Well, if you, in my ideal NGO, with emphasis on that, there does not necessarily need to be they don't need to be opposite collecting your KPI data and collecting your project data. Of course, the level of detail of your project data might be more extensive, but what the type of data you collect on the level of a project, for example, how many women are on the representative list of a certain party in a country, that can also be part of your strategic agenda. So, and I also think KPIs are a little bit in relation to key performance indicators. When I speak about strategic goals, it's very much on the change that you want to work on. So in fact, you need to do both. You need to measure your performance, but also, are we still, with all the projects that we do, are we still moving towards a strategic change that we originally envisioned?
Yeah. Okay. I think we now see a lot of organizations developing theory of changes that are like with these great impact statements that are all about change the world to make a better place. Do you think this helps in realizing this ideal NGO situation?
Yes, definitely. Actually, I think that the ideal NGO should have an organizational theory of change, describing the social change or the ecological change that they are working on. And that organizational theory of change should be guiding the program theory of changes and country theory of changes. So there needs to be a relation between the different theory of changes, and that needs to be guarded as well. So not just what I often see in practice is that with every single new opportunity for funding, people set out to design a theory of change completely anew.
Yeah.
Not connecting to any of the existing work that the organization does or to strategic goals that the organization has. So if you set out to do everything as a separate intervention, completely out of the context of your own organization, the chances of achieving your strategic agenda become less.
Yeah. Okay, and we have another question. When you show your impact, how would you go about co-creation? For example, where we help people access government services or get waivers from hospitals, etc. Without our social workers, they would not get that help. But we certainly cannot claim 100% of the government is, for example, providing the operation for free after our lobbying.
Yeah, okay. This is, of course, a very specific question in a specific case. I'm not saying that measuring your impact is easy. I'm just saying if you lose attention for the fact that you want to measure impact and also want to assure your contribution to a specific social change that you are working on, don't think of, in my view, you should not, you have to be aware of your own role and your own contribution. And it should not be an excuse saying, okay, measuring impact is so difficult and we can't attribute it to our actions. So we don't do it. No, if you can't attribute any of your actions to the impact that you want to achieve, then you should look at the interventions that you're doing. And also, of course, you're working together with many different actors, and all of these actors together might be the fuel or the engine to achieve the social change. The first picture was actually talking about that, the first slide. But it doesn't, you still need to be aware of what you have contributed to that, starting the engine to roll. That's my plea.
Yeah. And for example, with this larger strategic organizational TOC and this strategy, how to ensure that it doesn't become like something that is put on a shelf and then, we've had these workshops and we've written it down and it's printed and etc. And now it's just, okay, we go on with our daily business.
Yeah. Well, I think it's very important to, of course, also that the not just the project staff, but also the leadership roles in the organization invite or engage people on the strategic agenda with a regular intervals. So it's not just about delivering your donor reports and delivering on the, say, more practical stuff, but it's also about having regular talks and maybe inspiration on how we're doing as an organization and how do all these programs contribute to the social change in the countries that we work in and with the partners that we work in. So it should not, it really requires a continuous focus on addressing also your strategy. It cannot only be talking about programs.
No. To become integrated into...
Yeah, in basically everything that you do. Yeah.
And I can imagine that this topic comes out of your experience, of course. It's not for nothing that you say, okay, I want to present this. This is the Ideal NGO. Can you share a bit your experience or an anecdote that from the things that you've seen in organizations?
Yeah. Well, as said, I've worked with many organizations, both in the Netherlands, in Africa, in all over the world, basically. And I'm also not saying that I have I'm the only one who has the answer. Right? It's not about that. It's more on raising awareness and raising the topic that I think should be more present in how you manage these organizations. And not shy away from trying to measure impact or make an attempt to do that. An anecdote I would like to share with the audience is that I've seen an organization that was very highly performing on a specific program. Their approach was unique. It resulted in many donors wanting to fund that program. So they were extremely successful in raising money and also doing the implementation of that particular program. But the leadership of that organization did not view it that way. They were more concerned about, since they had set out for a certain amount of projects that needed to be signed, so that the KPI was formulated more on not the volume of the money and the attention and the performance of a particular program, but on how many projects do we implement. So the success of that particular program and the strength was actually not seen by the leadership of the organization, and the leadership was more worried about all the other departments that were not doing so well, and also putting the sum of the money, the overhead money and the money from the organization-wide budget into sustaining all the other departments that were actually not performing well. And it resulted in this very successful program to sort of shrink, because they could not deliver to the donors what they were doing in their high days. And the added value and the uniqueness sort of got lost. And it was, in my view, because also the strategy was not taken into account. If a certain part of your organization is extremely successful and highly appreciated by donors, you should also allow that part of your organization to be successful and support their success on the social change that you want.
Yeah, that's an interesting way in which also maybe KPIs can be misused.
Yes, definitely. Particularly if they're not entered or not based on your strategic goal, but more on, say, operational tick boxes.
Yeah.
Which can be very meaningless if you don't look at it also from a content perspective.
Yeah, but maybe it would mean also that there should be still a certain flexibility within your organization to be able to adapt to these kind of like sudden successes, or in which you can see that actually what this project is doing is gaining so much traction and so much success that this might be like one golden way to achieve what you want to achieve.
Yeah,
okay. Exactly. We have another question. Do you see differences between countries on how important NGOs find data collection and learning? On how important NGOs find data collection and learning? Sorry, I had the emphasis wrong.
I think this also has to do a little bit with the political culture in a specific country. For example, if you look at the USA, they are much more focused on data in general. Also, the commercial side of the USA is more focused on that. And that is also reflected in the way that these type of organizations and organizations funded by their funding are more geared towards having a focus on data and data collection and sort of evidence building for their interventions. It's not always necessarily so that collecting data in itself leads to learning, because also in that sense, you can collect a lot of data, but if you don't take your time to analyze it and to sort of start making some comparison with previous settings and really try to develop an insight from the data, then you won't learn from it. So data only becomes relevant if you really start to use it in your daily management or your reflection sessions. And maybe you'll find through the data that some parts need additional attention. So then you can do some focus group discussions, etc., to make more sense out of the data. So yeah, I do think that there's different, cultures, also political cultures in countries that determine the importance of data or not.
Okay, and another question: do you see differences in what kind of data they find important?
Yeah, I think for example, when this is a nice example, I think, when ERT was introduced in the United Kingdom by at the time called DFID, now they changed their name. The focus was mostly on finance and financial transparency. When the Dutch government introduced ERT, from the start, they also wanted to look at the results. So it was both finance and results data that they pushed for. Also, the push from the Dutch government was more on all organizations. At the start, they said anybody could use their own indicators, and we will make sure to draw our conclusions based on that. At a later stage, they reversed that and said, no, we want every fund recipient to also report against our indicators, so we have a better overview of what kind of results we are actually contributing to. So you see, it might change a little bit also on what governments find important or other stakeholders. Yeah. But I think as a non-profit, you also need to, for yourself, determine what you find important. Not only let it depend on what your donors tell you.
Yeah. Well, I have one other question from the participants. So, don't you think short-term projects, less than 1 year, tend not to have the desired impact, but just a tick box measure? No time for thinking through and effective startup.
Yeah. Of course, it's not just about the length of a project, if it's multiple years or 1 year, because also a short-term project can be successful, but then it's more about how and contribute to your longer-term change. But then it's more about be very clear in what you want to achieve in that period of time. Be realistic about it. So if you would say, I want to change the human rights situation in, Uganda completely, well, it would be very unrealistic to say that is changed in 1 year time. But of course, there is other goals that can still be related to your strategy that you are able to achieve in a shorter time period. But I think that's exactly the necessity to be maybe also a bit more realistic in your ambitions, not over ambitious and not under ambitious in what you can contribute to in a specific amount of time with a specific resource base and also funding base.
Yeah, and also another question which we spoke about earlier, but not in this webinar. When should you ideally start thinking about these things, like how am I going to measure my impact? How am I going to design my data collection? What do you see happening?
Yeah, for me, if you really want to collect data with a longer term view in mind. Data collection is in the design of your programs, in the design of your TOC, in as early as identifying actually the calls that you want to submit your proposals to. You should be aware of what you're trying to achieve in the long run. So data collection, designing your data models is very intrinsically part of how you organize as an organization. What I often see now is that organizations identify a certain opportunity, start writing a proposal, start promising all kinds of indicators to collect data, because they're so eager to get the money in that they forget to think about how realistic is it, what we set out to do, that we're actually going to achieve it. Is it contributing to the longer term goal, or is it just an opportunity that might seem interesting if you look with it from a very narrow perspective, but not so interesting when you look at it from a long-term perspective? So I think those pros and cons from the strategic agenda need to be, that needs a validation process, and not just on what is the chance that we get the money or not. You know, that in my view is a little bit too much focused on just the operational, having the engine rolling, but you forget to take into account the other aspects that you also should be engaged with.
Yeah. Okay, that's clear. And we have one last question, and then maybe we can go to our conclusions. The last question is, do you think there are times we overemphasize quantitative data to the detriment of qualitative or real impact of activities on the lives of beneficiaries, which cannot be demonstrated with numbers?
Again, also this, for me, there's no, no, how do you say? There's no just one or the other. It's not just about quantitative data or qualitative data. It should be both. So I think in the basis, you need to have your quantitative data in order. You need to be able to draw conclusions, or if you're on track with what you set out to do. But to get real insight in very specific changes on the ground, doing additional qualitative research and engaging with your beneficiaries or engaging with people in a local context is very important. So it's and. It's not just about quantitative, but it's also not just about qualitative, because with just the stories, you also, just a story of a particular beneficiary or just an example does not tell you how well you did as an organization. It's just a story of an individual, right? So you need both to really get a good insight in if you're on the right track or not.
Yeah. Okay, so we can move maybe to the, we have two concluding slides. So the first is tips to stick to your strategy. So maybe you can explain those 4 points, or summarizes actually what we talked about in the half an hour.
So very important to be strategic. So have a clear message of your added value as organization. You should be driving your organization, not your donors. Focus and over-focus on projects has a danger of projects to be in an internal competition within one organization, and it sort of dilutes you from your final goal. Stay focused, be clear in what you want to achieve. It helps you to enable the measurement of the change if you really know what you set out to do as an organization. And it also helps you to connect with donors if you have, because in that way you can have a convincing track record. Because your focus is clear, it goes together with the clear message, and your donors, you can tell them a convincing story and show it with evidence. Be proactive, I think, is also very important. So instead of waiting for your donors to set out in search for you, select your donors based on your strategic goals, select your partners based on your strategic goals, etc., and design the project together. This also helps to build a relationship with your stakeholders and increase the chances of success. Efficient is also important, or reuse. So when you have a very clear strategic framework shared with all people in the organization, instead of having to design every project anew, you can reuse based on your core message and tune it into the language of a particular donor or a particular call of proposals or a particular stakeholder. It will be less reinventing the wheel, less fragmented, and it also prevents a little bit the high, preventing your staff to have to do it from scratch the whole time, which can also lead to overburden them. Just reuse if you collect your information properly, it will also help you to be able to reuse it.
Yeah, well, actually, I couldn't agree more. I think with these four topics, it's actually also the bottom line of what we used to tell in our trainings to people regarding to fundraising. But of course, it's also what we're talking about today is also related to fundraising and to how you work with your donors. But yes, actually being proactive, being in a driver's seat, trying to have a strategic plan for your fundraising and for your goals, that's very, very important. And it helps to gain better results overall. So before we go to the very last slide, there's one more question that came in, which is, do you have an example of your ideal NGO? Which NGO is one you think we can learn a lot from? Your NGO, right?
No, it's my ideal NGO exists in my head. It's a bit of a difficult question in the sense that, of course, these NGOs are also our clients. So I will not just shine the light on one of them. So maybe this person can reach out to me in person and we'll have a talk about it. I'm not here to blame and shame one particular NGO. I hope that what I've talked about today resonates with most of your practices in most of your organizations. And it's now up to you to, even if your NGO might not seem to be very strategic, and that's our last slide, there's also something you can do about it. So find out about the strategic goals of your organization. Is there already an organizational TOC that guides the work? And if not, try to persuade that this is needed. And you can help to select the donors and calls that fit the strategic goals of the organization. Once you find out. Design your proposals in line with the strategic goals and the core messages, as well as the indicators, the way you will be measuring the progress. Try to think about what is needed in practice to collect the data and do the reporting. So not just make a very nice design of all the information you want to collect, but also think about how you can collect it efficiently and how feasible it is to collect all this data. And because I've seen many cases people design, you have one program with 150 indicators. Yeah, you can question if that really adds value, because the time spent on collecting all that information, who is going to analyze that information? Do you have the tools available for that? Do you have resources available to really do something with all this collected data? Those are questions that also a program officer should ask him or herself. So make suggestions for smart and simple reporting in line with the strategic goals. And also have, in case when you are the manager of a certain donor or program, have a dialogue with your donor to explore what their minimum amount of information need is. Because sometimes the people, they work based on the formats of a specific call, but they sort of are overachieving or overstretching themselves in wanting to deliver perfectly according to that format. But when you engage in a dialogue, maybe the donor is already satisfied with not saying that it's lesser information, no, but lesser indicators to prove that you've been successful. So engaging in that dialogue is also very important on agreeing what is the minimum information need, instead of always offering the maximum and then getting into a sort of squeeze because the budget doesn't give you enough resources to be able to deliver. And I think I've seen that many times. And people get burned out, you know, they overpromise the whole time, and then they have problems in delivering what they originally promised. So maybe you should make your life, in that sense, a little bit more easy, but easy with smartness on the strategic, with a strategic view.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, there is enough to do, I think. for everyone.
Yeah.
And yeah, well, I really want to thank you for this talk and this very informative views. And yeah, I forgot to mention in the beginning that actually Data4Development and HVFC have started a collaboration last summer. And summer already feels so far away, but it's quite fresh still. And yeah, this is also part of our getting to know each other, learning from each other. And yeah, it was really very interesting for me personally, and I also hope for the people who were participating today. So also thank you very much for everybody who was here with us today. And yeah, I hope to see you soon in a next webinar or meeting or training or anything that comes up. And yeah, thank you so much. And till soon, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.